Imagine spending over $1,400 a year on books that are, well, they're practically obsolete the moment the ink's dry.
Yeah, it's a huge burden.
Right. Now, imagine you're studying for this high-stakes medical career, and you're trying to learn the nuances of patient care from this heavy static textbook.
Which, cannot possibly tell you about a federal healthcare regulation that changed, say, last Tuesday.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to explore this really fascinating academic case study about a radical, almost rebellious shift in higher education.
It really is rebellious. Yeah.
We're looking at a nursing program that saw that exact scenario, completely ditch their traditional textbooks, and just replace them with a system of expert-led, on-demand, multimedia webinars.
Which is a huge pivot.
It is, and we're going to explore how shifting from static text to dynamic video changes not just the financial burden of learning, but, well, how effectively we actually absorb and apply knowledge in the real world.
Because it's a case study that really forces us to look at the very mechanics of how education is delivered today. Right. It challenges that traditional model of the university classroom, and it asks a highly uncomfortable question for academia, Are the tools we've relied on for centuries still the best tools for the job?
Or are we just clinging to print out of habit?
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to think about your own life for a second. Just think about your everyday learning habits.
Yeah, put yourself in their shoes.
Right. When was the last time you bought a dense, expensive textbook, sat down at your kitchen table, and read it cover to cover just to figure something out?
Probably never.
Yeah. Now, contrast that with this. When was the last time you had a very real, immediate problem? Like maybe your sink was leaking, or you forgot how to execute a complex pivot table in Excel.
Oh, the pivot tables. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you immediately just looked up a tutorial on YouTube to solve it.
I mean, that's what we all do.
For most of us, that second scenario is just how we operate now. It happens daily.
And that instinct is exactly what this study unpacks. To really set the stage, we have to look at the financial and behavioral realities of the modern student.
Which are pretty grim.
They are. According to the research we're looking at today, the average cost of college books was a staggering $1,451 annually.
Over $1,400.
Yeah.
That's for materials you might open, 3 times a semester?
Right. And while that number has been slightly declining recently, largely because students are seeking out rentals or digital alternatives out of pure financial desperation, frankly.
Yeah, they're just trying to survive the semester.
Exactly. But it remains a massive hurdle. Meanwhile, the source explicitly notes that students are organically gravitating towards social media platforms like YouTube to educate themselves over the course of their studies.
Oh, for sure.
The popularity of the traditional textbook is genuinely starting to wane because students are actively seeking out a medium that fits their actual lifestyle.
Well, yeah, because human nature always seeks the path of least resistance.
Absolutely.
Especially when information on a screen is visual, engaging, easily searchable, and, often free.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't merely a story about college students trying to save a few bucks on campus.
Right, it's deeper than that.
It's about a fundamental mismatch between how institutions are trying to teach and how modern learners actually consume information in their daily lives.
The medium has to match the reality.
Exactly. And that is exactly the opportunity that the faculty in this online nursing leadership course saw. They realized they couldn't just keep assigning chapters.
They had to adapt.
They needed to make a pronounced pedagogical shift to capture that engaging video format.
Which brings us to the core problem with print. I like to think about it this way. Buying a traditional textbook in a fast-moving, high-stakes field like healthcare.
Oh, this is a great comparison.
It's basically like buying a brand-new smartphone that can never, ever receive a software update. The moment that book goes to the printer, the moment it's bound and shipped to the campus bookstore, it's already becoming a historical document.
It's obsolete.
Completely. The healthcare environment is changing rapidly. Regulations shift, best practices evolve, new technologies are introduced. A static book simply cannot keep up with the pace of modern medicine.
That analogy captures the dilemma perfectly. The source highlights that in a rapidly changing healthcare environment, it is incredibly difficult for expensive textbooks to contain the absolute latest information.
They take years to publish.
Right. And you cannot compromise on accuracy in healthcare. I mean, a minor administrative change or a new legal compliance standard can alter the entire workflow of a hospital floor.
Okay, I love the idea of ditching textbooks, but I'm going to be honest here.
Yeah.
If I'm lying in a hospital bed, I do not want my nurse trained by the equivalent of a YouTube influencer.
Fair point. Very fair.
Right. I want them to have a rigorous, scientifically sound education. So if a university says, hey, we're dropping the textbook and letting you watch videos, how do we know this isn't just a watered-down, budget-cut version of a real education?
That's the big fear, isn't it?
Yeah. Doesn't this run the risk of becoming glorified YouTube?
Well, that is the ultimate tension the faculty had to navigate. They couldn't just point their students to random internet search results.
Right, go search how to be a nurse on Google.
Exactly. That wouldn't work. They needed to maintain strict academic rigor. So they didn't just guess at how to do this. They utilized a framework known as Trebian's model from the research.
Okay.
It's a student-centered approach to developing technology-based solutions.
What does that actually mean in practice, though? Because student-centered sounds great, but how does it work?
Well, instead of asking, how do we force our traditional syllabus into an online format, Trebian's model forces educators to look at the student's actual environment.
Like where they physically are.
Right. It asks, what is the student actually doing at 11 o'clock at night when they log on to study?
Oh, I see.
It maps the technology to the student's existing behavior, recognizing that they are already primed to learn through on-demand video. The goal is to advance learning in that online environment while maintaining strict content rigor.
So how did they solve the glorified YouTube problem?
Well, the faculty partnered with a highly vetted organization called Lorman Education Services.
Okay, so who are they?
Yeah.
Because that does not sound like a typical university publisher.
They aren't, not at all. Lorman Education Services has spent 36 years educating active professionals.
36 years. Wow.
Yeah. They offer live webinars and on-demand products that focus on highly specialized, complex content.
Like what kind of content?
Evolving laws, business changes, compliance regulations, and crucially, they vet their presenters rigorously.
Oh, so it's not just anyone with a webcam.
Exactly. These webinars aren't presented by academics who haven't set foot in a hospital in 20 years. They are presented by top professionals currently operating in their immediate fields.
Okay, that addresses the rigor problem entirely. You're getting information straight from the practitioners doing the work right now.
Right. The content is concise, it's accurate, and returning to your smartphone analogy, it is continually updated.
So they get those software updates.
Precisely. If a new regulation drops, a new webinar is produced. By integrating Lorman, the faculty solved the obsolete textbook problem.
That's brilliant.
They ensured the information was legally sound and professionally rigorous while still capturing that dynamic multimedia format that students naturally prefer.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because establishing why they needed to do this is one thing, but how they actually executed this curriculum hack is just brilliant.
It really is.
They didn't just add these webinars as like optional extra credit to supplement a book.
No, not at all.
They replaced the course textbook entirely. They instituted a 22-webinar Lorman pathway specifically focused on leadership, quality, and risk.
It was a wholesale replacement of the primary text.
A complete replacement. And the logistics of this are wild. Do you know the cost to the college to implement this massive shift?
It was zero. Wow.
Zero. Nothing. And the financial savings for the students are massive, considering we were just talking about that $1,400 average textbook burden.
Absolutely life-changing for some students.
Yeah. Plus, it's not just a one-and-done assignment. Once the students get access, they have it for a full year to all updated webinars.
Which is incredible value.
And to incentivize them, the faculty tied it directly to the grading structure. Students earn a certificate of completion, and they get 5 points toward their final grade for finishing all 22 webinars.
It creates a structured, highly rewarding pathway that mimics professional development rather than traditional academia.
It really does. And I want to list off some of these specific webinar titles because they highlight how incredibly practical this curriculum became.
Let's hear them.
We're not talking about abstract nursing theory here. We're talking about titles like Understanding the Difference Between a Serious Complaint and Employee Drama.
Ah, that's a good one.
Lead Like a Boss Without Being Bossy. Managing Up, Down, and Sideways. And even foundational things like creating and managing a budget in Excel or basics of accounting.
I mean, think about what happens when a nursing manager doesn't know how to create a budget in Excel.
They're stuck.
Completely. They can't effectively advocate for more staff. They can't justify buying necessary new equipment to the hospital administration.
Right.
Their clinical skills might be absolutely flawless, but their unit falls apart because they lack the basic administrative scaffolding to support their team.
But wait, that raises a huge logistical question. If there is no textbook, how on earth are they grading this?
That's the trick.
You can't exactly hand out a Scantron test with multiple choice questions on a webinar about navigating workplace drama,
Right. You cannot use static assessments for dynamic content.
Okay.
If you change what students are consuming, you must fundamentally change how you assess their comprehension. So the faculty revised their assignments entirely.
Also.
Well, instead of standard tests that just measure rote memorization, they required students to write reflections on the webinar content.
Oh, reflection, so it's more personal.
Yes. The students had to assess their own knowledge and explicitly explain how they would apply those specific concepts to their daily practice.
That forces a completely different kind of cognitive processing. They have to actually synthesize what they watched.
Exactly. And this is deeply rooted in pedagogical theory. The study cites a framework that explains that incorporating real-world expertise optimizes learning outcomes because it shifts the entire learning mechanism.
Shifts it from what to what?
It moves the student from passive reading, which is often just dragging a highlighter across a page and hoping you remember it, to active, real-time application.
Yeah, reading isn't always learning.
Exactly. They watch an expert explain a management concept, and then they have to immediately articulate, here is exactly how I will use this strategy on the floor of my hospital tomorrow.
That is such a crucial pivot. And it brings us to a really important question about the human impact of this deep dive.
Yeah, the human side is fascinating.
We've talked about the logistics, the money, the pedagogical theory.
Yeah.
But these students are working nursing professionals. How did they actually respond to this tech-heavy administrative approach?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, because nursing is arguably one of the most hands-on, deeply human-centric, empathetic professions in the world.
Absolutely.
So how does sitting asynchronously alone at a computer, watching a webinar about accountability in the workplace or accounting basics actually translate to better patient care? It feels like a massive disconnect.
It does feel like a disconnect until you look at what makes a healthcare environment actually function behind the scenes.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is the research highlighted in the study. It emphasizes that nursing leadership isn't just about advanced clinical skills.
Right.
It requires deep self-awareness and emotional intelligence.
Because a charge nurse isn't just treating illnesses. They are managing teams of highly stressed, exhausted people in life-or-death situations.
That is the core of it. And the student feedback gathered in the source illustrates this beautifully. When students watched these Lorman webinars, they weren't just learning cold corporate facts.
What were they learning then?
They realized that understanding department workflows, anticipating how roles change after someone gets a promotion, and recognizing administrative best practices, all of those dry-sounding topics are exactly what creates a supportive work environment.
And the environment dictates the quality of care.
Yes. The students themselves noted that a positive, supportive environment is what ultimately allows nurses to provide the highest quality care to their patients.
That makes total sense.
You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot provide excellent, empathetic patient care if your department is actively toxic, or if your manager doesn't know how to schedule shifts fairly, or if the unit is completely disorganized.
It's the invisible infrastructure of care.
Beautifully put.
And the real-world impact of this is just striking when you look at the student responses. I want to share two specific student anecdotes from the source that really bring this human element to life.
Oh, please do.
So the first one goes back to that webinar title I mentioned earlier. One student described having a literal aha moment regarding the webinar on investigating complaints versus employee drama.
Which on the surface sounds like an HR issue, not a patient care issue.
Right. But this student realized that knowing how to handle that specific distinction correctly is what saves the workplace environment.
Ah.
Recognizing when an investigation is legally necessary versus when a situation is just interpersonal friction prevents the team from fracturing.
That's huge.
It keeps the unit cohesive and focused on the patients, rather than internal politics.
It protects the emotional bandwidth of the entire medical staff.
Exactly. And the second anecdote is even more intense, I think. Another student connected deeply with a webinar presented by Pamela Nelson on staffing and scheduling best practices.
Very relevant.
Incredibly. In their reflection, this student revealed an incredibly harsh reality about their day-to-day life. They wrote that their hospital is so consistently short-staffed that the staffing office workers personally text their cell phone almost daily,
Wow.
literally just essentially begging them to come into work on their days off.
Think about the psychological toll of that. That is a profoundly stressful reality to live with day in and day out.
Almost daily texts begging you to work.
Hmm.
And here is this student, exhausted, taking an online class after a grueling shift, and suddenly they are presented with a webinar from an industry expert directly addressing the exact structural nightmare they are living through. Staffing and scheduling best practices. It's no longer an abstract academic requirement at that point. It's a lifeline.
That connection right there is the mechanism of why this pedagogical shift was so successful. It ties directly back to a concept the researchers bring up, the concept of faculty caring.
Faculty caring. That sounds like a warm, fuzzy academic term, but it seems much deeper here.
It is. This brings us to a real paradigm shift. Usually we think of academic care as a professor being nice, or maybe granting an extension on a late paper.
Right, like office hours?
Yeah. But this study shows that true institutional care is structural. In an online, asynchronous environment, it is very easy for students to feel isolated and for faculty to feel distant.
Very true.
But by providing tools that actually address the stressful daily realities of their students' lives, while simultaneously saving them hundreds of dollars, the faculty demonstrated profound care.
It's practical empathy.
Empathy, in this case, looks like relevance. It's looking at an overworked nurse and saying, we aren't going to make you read 50 pages of abstract theory. We are going to give you the exact toolkit you need to survive your shift tomorrow and lead your team out of chaos.
They proved they understand the actual world their students are operating in. They equip them for survival and leadership in a flawed system, rather than just testing their memory.
Exactly. And when there is structural evidence that faculty care about the student's reality, it deeply influences learning outcomes.
The students engage more.
They engage more authentically, their reflections show depth or synthesis, and they ultimately become better, more resilient leaders.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a lot of ground here, from the soaring $1,400 costs of textbooks to the emotional intelligence required to run a nursing ward.
We have.
But I want to turn this focus entirely onto you, the listener. Because even if you are not a nurse, and even if you haven't set foot in a classroom in decades, this deep dive fundamentally challenges how you consume information in your own life and career.
It asks all of us to audit our own learning habits and the sources we rely on.
Look at your own field, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Are you relying on static, outdated textbooks, whether those are literal books or just old company manuals, or outdated ways of doing things that haven't been updated in years?
Or are you actively seeking out dynamic, expert-led insights?
Right. Are you finding the modern equivalent of those Lorman webinars information that is real-time, accurate, and that you can apply immediately to improve your environment and solve the problems right in front of you?
Which raises an important question, and it's a thought I want to leave you with today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If rigorous traditional university programs are successfully replacing expensive textbooks with on-demand, specialized webinars from professional services, what does this mean for the future of the massive academic publishing industry?
Oh, no. Yeah.
Could the future of higher education look less like a traditional campus bookstore with stacks of heavy, expensive paper and more like a curated streaming service?
Like a Netflix for learning.
Imagine a Netflix for professional skills, where the very concept of a single, static author writing a definitive textbook is replaced entirely by constantly updating panels of active, working experts.
That would change everything.
It would fundamentally democratize and accelerate how we train professionals across every single industry.
It really makes you wonder if that heavy, expensive textbook sitting on the shelf is just the ultimate outdated smartphone, quietly waiting for a software update that is never, ever going to come.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning what you read, keep seeking out the experts, and we'll catch you next time.